I'm Kelly Wallace. New talks. The U.S. will sit down with Iran this week to try to bring a halt to sectarian violence in Iraq. This as CBS News takes an exclusive tour of the battlefield with the top U.S. commander. Flash floods. Rescue teams are out in force in parts of Texas inundated with rain. Gasoline bottleneck are mounting breakdowns at oil refineries, causing higher prices at the gas pump. And sky's the limit. How high can prices go in the super high-end real estate market?
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
Good evening. Russ Mitchell is off tonight. With the September 15th deadline looming for a report on President Bush's surge strategy in Iraq, there's new evidence tonight the U.S. is pulling out all the stops to show progress in the war-torn country. We have a number of reports, but we begin in Washington with news the U.S. and Iran will hold high-level talks in Baghdad this week to discuss Iraq's security. Here's Dan Raviv.
Since the last meeting in Baghdad in late May, the need to show progress, some success during the U.S. surge, is even more urgent. That's one reason for Tuesday's meeting between U.S. and Iranian ambassadors to discuss security issues. The Iranians said today they hope for tangible results. It won't be easy. The U.S. claims Iran's special forces gave the green light to smugglers to bring explosives and these sophisticated roadside bombs into Iraq. Just today, the U.S. military nabbed 2 suspected weapons smugglers near the Iranian border.
Iran says that it wants to help achieve strategic stabilization in Iraq. Well, match your actions with your words, because certainly Iran's actions to date have not matched their words.
Iran has complaints against the U.S., charging 4 Iranian Americans were sent to Tehran, part of a wider plan to overthrow the Islamic Republic. With Iran having so much influence over the Shiites in Iraq, some Mideast analysts think this week's talks can help bring stability. Some don't.
If you reach out to the Iranian regime with your hand, it's likely to be bitten. The last thing that the United States can get out of Iran is a concession on Iraq.
But with all the political pressure to show something's going right in Iraq, the Bush administration is going to try again with Iran, while accusing Iran of helping terrorists and secretly working to build a nuclear bomb. Kelly?
Dan, we know there's also a lot of concern at the White House about Pakistan. What are officials saying tonight about that country?
A lot of unrest in that important ally. Now, the policy is to work with Pakistan's President Musharraf against terrorists, but the chief advisor here on Homeland Security, Fran Townsend, today refused to rule out unilateral U.S. action in Pakistan, especially if al-Qaeda leaders can be located for sure. Kelly?
Dan, thanks for that report. Dan Raviv reporting from Washington. The man responsible for carrying out President Bush's surge strategy in Iraq, who is set to report to Congress on how well it is working in September, went out to assess the situation on the ground this weekend. Our Alan Pizzi was invited to go along on this exclusive tour.
The U.S. commander in Iraq is very conscious of the September 15th deadline, but it hasn't changed his routine. Every week, General David Petraeus heads out to what the military calls the battle space, to look, to talk, and to listen.
Okay, let's go.
It's part fact-finding, and senior officers are the first to have their say.
You can read all the intel, you can read all the reports, you can get all the briefings you want in Baghdad, but there's no substitute for being out on the ground, for talking to the leaders who are actually doing it.
There were no headlines from this trip, but all information is valuable, and while the troops' morale is invariably described as high, it's not something their commanding officer takes for granted.
You're part of something real important, and you know that.
Increasing use is being made of airstrikes to keep troops out of harm's way and hit insurgents when they least expect it. But there is also a toll in civilian casualties, known as collateral damage. Petraeus described the political pressures, both here in Iraq and in Washington, as a couple of extra rocks in my rucksack. But it never shows when he meets his troops.
He conducted over 150 combat patrols, over 10,000 miles.
What U.S. military officers here in Iraq say they want is a chance to reduce troop levels at a rate that matches the Iraqi army's ability to stand up and do the job on their own. And that, they say, can't be done to meet any specific deadline.
This won't be a light switch. There won't be one moment when Iraq goes from all coalition to all Iraq.
That's another way of saying the September 15th deadline is just another version of a soldier getting a chance to tell his boss what's going on. Alan Fizzi, CBS News, Al Qut, Iraq.
And joining me now for some perspective on the September 15th deadline for reporting on the effects of the troop surge in Iraq is Senator Olympia Snowe, Republican of Maine. Senator, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Kelly.
So, Senator, what level of progress do you need to see and hear by September 15th?
Well, essentially that the Iraqi government has initiated and implemented the 18 political benchmarks that was specified in law and that they themselves had established almost a year ago. And every deadline has come and gone and nothing has happened, because that really is central as to whether or not they choose to have a united Iraq or they're going to continue to promote a sectarian agenda.
You've talked to the president, you talked to his advisors. Do you think come September 15th, and if some Republicans start dropping off, he will be open to a real change in policy in Iraq?
The president must understand that September 15th is a hard deadline, a deadline for change in strategy in Iraq. So I would hope the president would work with members of both parties, the leaderships in both the House and Senate, to orchestrate a different direction for Iraq after September 15th. That would be upholding the will of the American people and also recognizing that the time has come for the Iraqi government to begin to take the reins of their own political future. You know, frankly, they're planning to take an August recess, which is outrageous in my estimation, when men and women who are serving this country and defending Iraq are dying every day on the battlefield. It seems to me that the Iraqi government must demonstrate that they're prepared to make the political sacrifices as our men and women have been making the military sacrifice each and every day.
Senator Olympia Snowe, thanks for those insights today.
Thank you.
Turning now to the major flooding in the Southwest. Storms yesterday in Texas dumped more than a foot of rain in areas west of San Antonio, burying small towns like D'Hanis under 3 to 4 feet of water. Hari Srinivasan is there tonight.
Bill and Rose's in D'Hanis, Texas usually brings in the weekend crowd with their live music and their chicken fried steak. But today, they're adding up their losses.
Just put in $2,500 worth of groceries.
Bill walked me across a hardwood floor turned soft by 4 feet of water during the flash flood and through a kitchen that'll have to be thoroughly disinfected.
I got so many people that depend on you and that work for us that need their money too.
Down the street, residents like Frankie Crawford are mopping up and washing out what they can.
It's a slow process. You get some of it done and you see you trip it all back.
Most of the streets in town were underwater after 17 inches of rain fell in just 12 hours. Dozens of people had to be rescued.
I just quickly got the kids and put them up on top of the house because I wasn't going to risk it.
176 passengers had to be offloaded from an Amtrak train when high waters closed more than 35 miles of track. In Kendall County, Texas, Boy Scouts had to find a new route out after their campgrounds were inundated by a rising river.
And we came back down later and tried to, see whatever gear we could retrieve, and we retrieved it. But lost 5 vehicles and troop trailer.
In San Antonio, monkeys were stranded on high platforms at a biomedical research facility, while in Belmont, some just took the event in stride.
We just kind of watched stuff go by the river, float propane tanks and, all kind of good stuff.
Kelly, the railroad tracks and the railroads in this section of town, you could probably hear, are up and running, but it's going to take quite some time for businesses around here to come back. All this upholstered furniture, it's going to smell awfully bad even after it dries out, and it'll take some time for insurance to pay back restaurants like this to get them up and cooking again. Kelly?
Definitely tough times for those folks there. Hari, thanks. Hari Srinivasan reporting tonight from Texas. Across the ocean now, Britain is experiencing floods this weekend, which are being called unprecedented. Large parts of the country are still underwater and more rain is expected. Elizabeth Palmer reports.
Hundreds of square miles of southern England are underwater after a month's worth of rain fell in about an hour on Friday afternoon. Flash floods trapped people in their homes, on highways, and even in hotels, waiting for help to arrive. Never before has the British Air Force had so many helicopters deployed at one time on rescue missions. The worst-hit counties lie on either side of Britain's longest river, the Severn, which has burst its banks, as has the Avon River, leaving one of Britain's most famous tourist destinations awash. Stratford-upon-Avon, Shakespeare's birthplace, is this weekend. Stratford-under-Avon.
Well, the big question, what's causing this terrible weather? This year, the jet stream seems to have moved several hundred miles south down there. That means that weather systems that bring storms and rain have been able to batter the country.
And environmentalists say Britain should brace itself for more of this kind of battering.
We certainly think that the severity of the rain that we've seen this time around is probably the sort of thing that will happen increasingly with climate change.
No one has even begun to calculate the cost of the damage to homes, cars, crops, and waterlogged businesses, including the drinking water treatment plant in Gloucester, which means, to add insult to injury, thousands of residents are now facing a shortage of water. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, London.
And still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, how breakdowns at U.S. oil refineries are creating havoc with prices at the pump. And welcome back. Gas prices never seem to go down much these days. You know that. Today's price stood at a national average $2.99 a gallon. Searching for a culprit? Take a look at the number of refineries, which has fallen sharply since 1982. And this year, there's a record number of refinery failures, as we hear now from Tony Guida.
Fire at an oil refinery in Texas, floods knocking out a refinery in Kansas, an oil spill in Indiana, a lightning strike on a refinery in New Jersey. In the past 2 months, events like these, combined with maintenance failures, have disrupted production at 43 of the nation's 145 refineries. The result? Nearly 30,000 fewer barrels of oil a day being refined. A lot less gasoline available for this country's thirsty cars.
We're on the razor's edge of vulnerability right now.
You can't blame OPEC for this mess. They're producing oil as fast as they can. You can blame gas-guzzling SUVs and sizzling economies in places like China for sopping up all the oil they can get. The United States is sopping up more than its share. We're swimming in crude, says one analyst. Supply is not the problem. But the push to jumpstart refineries after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita monopolized so much equipment and manpower that the nation's oil refiners say they had to defer regularly scheduled maintenance at other facilities. The resulting refinery failures couldn't come at a worse time.
For the past 4 or 5 summers, refineries have been running at 99 or 100% capacity just to be able to keep up with demand. But demand year to year is going up by anywhere from 2 to 3%.
AAA's Robert Sinclair knows that's a formula for disaster, and there's no help in the pipeline.
The demand keeps going up, but we haven't had a new refinery built in the United States since the early 1970s.
That's because oil companies weren't printing money in the 80s and 90s like they are these days. They say they had little incentive to build refineries. Now, with refineries overloaded and failing for one reason or another, you are paying 88 cents a gallon just to refine the oil at the pump. That's up more than 50 cents a gallon since the start of this year. Kelly?
A lot of angry consumers out there, I'm sure. All right, Tony, thanks so much for that. Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, fame, fortune, and a fall. Looking back at the life of Tammy Faye Baker. Tammy Faye Messner has died of cancer at the age of 65. It was as Tammy Faye Baker that she reached the top of televangelism in the 1980s. Bianca Solorzano has her story.
Oh, what a beautiful morning.
They were the most famous eyes in America. Tammy Faye Messner was a rock of faith for some, a punchline for others.
We're going to really need your prayer support.
You have to admit she made an unforgettable impression.
We cannot be defeated.
She was preparing to be a missionary when she fell in love with Bible college classmate Jim Baker. Together they built a televangelism empire. In the 80s, their Praise the Lord Club reached 13 million viewers and brought in millions in donations. But then it all unraveled.
God, give me a miracle.
First, Baker's affair with church secretary Jessica Hahn.
Jim Baker did not steal money from PCL.
Then revelations he skimmed $4 million from church coffers. He went to jail. She tried to pick up the pieces.
Jim makes any place he is a better place.
But she divorced Baker and married his business partner, Roe Messner. Her optimism was unshakable to the very end, even as the cancer made her almost unrecognizable.
And I genuinely love you, and I genuinely care, and I genuinely want to see you in heaven someday.
Tammy Faye Messner was 65 years old. Bianca Solorzano, CBS News, New York.
And coming up on tonight's CBS Evening News, what real estate slump? This house has a price tag of $30 million. Economic figures show the United States housing market is in a slump. Prices and sales are down, defaults are up all over the country. But we found a location where sales are soaring. As Hattie Kaufman reports, it's in the stratosphere.
You can just peek over here and see the 3 levels. And this is the guest house.
Jade Mills is an agent in LA's high-end housing market.
It used to be that $5 million would buy a beautiful house. Now I would say you have to go to $10 million to buy your dream home.
Talk about dreams. This one sells for $30 million. There's a movie theater, a bowling alley, and amazingly, below the regular pool, an underground pool.
What is the one thing that pushes the price up? I think it's great square footage. Anything over 30,000 square feet.
$30 million. And then there's this Beverly Hills mansion listed at $165 million. But that record price comes as the rest of the housing market is down 22% because of problems with subprime mortgages and foreclosures.
Sales are very low. They're probably the lowest they have been in 10 years.
Real estate analyst John Caraval says that's not the whole story.
Once you get up to the very high end, the market removes itself from those fundamentals and behaves onto its own.
In fact, across the country, while overall home sales are down, high-end sales are up. Look at these numbers. L.A., overall sales down 20%, high-end sales up 20%. San Francisco, down 19%, high-end up 4%. New York, overall down 17%, high-end up 7%.
I would say this is a real salon.
Elizabeth Stribling sells to the rich in New York City.
When you look at this glazing on the wall,
she agrees in the luxury market, prices remain steady.
Complemented by a stunning gold foil ceiling.
Gold foil and all, this townhouse is selling for $15 million.
You feel you're really in a calm haven.
From the east to the west.
It's really fit for royalty.
No one knows how long prices for these princely palaces can remain insulated from the rest of the market. Hattie Kaufman, CBS News, Bel Air.
If only we all had all that money. We'll be right back. Finally tonight, the final Harry Potter book is rewriting publishing history. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows flew off the shelves in the United States this weekend. Readers bought a record-smashing 8.3 million copies in its first 24 hours on sale. Now that's a bestseller. And that's the CBS Evening News for this Sunday. I'm Kelly Wallace, CBS News in New York. Good night and have a great rest of your weekend.
CBS News. Experience you can trust.